Welcome to the Adventures in CRE Audio Series. Join Michael Belasco and Spencer Burton as they pull back the curtain on everything commercial real estate and introduce you to some of the top minds in the industry. If you want to take your skills to the next level and be part of a growing community of CRE professionals across the world, this is for you.
Hello and welcome back to this episode of the podcast. This is going to be a very, very unique podcast. Let me start with this. We have a guest today that is currently residing in Ukraine. And obviously, there's a lot of things going on right now in Ukraine. So our guest name is Dima Nazarenko. Did I say that right, Dima?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. We're excited to have Dima here. And we're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his career that he's pursuing in real estate, despite the obvious challenges that are happening. But I don't know that this conversation goes in any one particular direction. I'm incredibly grateful that you're here. I think that we're going to learn a lot about, what it means to really pursue a career and to pursue a dream in spite of some of these challenges. So thanks for coming.
Set it up. Yeah.
What's that?
Can I set it up, Sam?
Yeah, please do. I'll turn it over to Spencer. Let's start with you, buddy.
Yeah. So for the viewers, listeners, how Dima and the rest of the A.CRE team got together. So Dima reached out to us. I don't know, Dima, it's been a month or two, about joining our real estate financial modeling accelerator program. And we thought that was so incredible. And why? Because I think when literally your world is falling apart around you, oftentimes we give up our plans, our dreams, what have you, due to the circumstances. And that's not necessarily wrong to do that or to put your plans on pause. But we were so impressed with Dima and his continual progression to improve himself and in the industry in spite of all of that. So Dima, let's actually start with maybe why don't you give the audience your background? Where are you from originally? How did you get into real estate? And then we'll go from there.
Okay, sure. So first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's also a unique experience for me as well, because that's my first podcast. So I'm originally from Ukraine, as you understand. I was studying in Austria. I finished like 2 years ago, and then after finishing, I came back to Ukraine because I landed a job in the private equity fund here, which was more generalistic, with focus on tech and agri. Back then, back at my university times, I could never imagine I would end up in real estate. I didn't not even consider it. So yeah, I was working here, in Ukraine, in a private equity fund for 1 year, first as an intern, then promoted to junior analyst, supporting with fundraising activities, portfolio management, looking for new opportunities. And then 1 year into the company, the war started. And well, as you can imagine, half of our portfolio was in agri, so it was destroyed by Russian missiles. And yeah, then we also could not raise our second fund of 150 mils because no one wants to invest in Ukraine right when it's a war-torn country. So basically, half of our team was let go, including me. And back then, I had no job, and it was tough times because you were living yesterday in a peaceful world, and today you have war. I don't know how to express it or how to explain this. It's just back then, when I'm reflecting back, it looked like in this movies, when you have when I exit the home one morning and I have a rocket flying above my head. So yeah, everyone was kind of lost back then. So but we were trying to do something for our country, and after I was kind of fired, not fired, but let go, because the fund would not survive, right? Together with my colleagues, we started a charity fund called Children of Heroes to support children who lost one or two parents during the war with Russia. And this consisted of everything, starting from humanitarian aid, financial aid, and now it's one of the most actually successful charity funds in Ukraine in this realm. So far, we managed to raise around 60 million of hryvnias. It's around $2 million. That's not including the help from partners, and we have right now around 3,500 children under supervision, let's call it this way. I'm not directly involved anymore, like in day-to-day activities. I'm more like kind of a co-founder and a kind of counseling sometimes on some matters. But yeah, it was a great experience to kind of back then to kind of start this initiative to help people, and also back then the stories we heard like from people. Okay, like look, my situation. When I'm hearing like people, oh, you're from Ukraine, like I'm so sorry for your situation. Like I'm always feeling a bit kind of embarrassed by this because like literally I'm in Kyiv, which is probably one of the safest places in Ukraine right now, right? Like back then you could not even imagine what happened in cities like Mariupol or like Donbas, right? Because I had stories which I would not probably like share, like in this podcast, but I was kind of having direct contact with people who were, who lost someone, like small children who couldn't find their parents, and this was awful. But yeah, coming back to my kind of real estate trajectory. So as I said, I could never imagine kind of working in a real estate fund, and I lost a job. I was working for some time in this charity fund, but eventually I wanted to go back to what I was doing before and what I was studying for, right? I could not land any job like back then in private equity or venture capital because in Ukraine, well, there was nothing happening, right? Everything was on hold, and I also could not leave in the country to go to Europe or somewhere else to work there. And most positions I applied for were on the ground. But I found an opportunity, like super randomly. Actually, my colleague sent it to me and said, hey, probably you should try it out. So basically, I applied to a global hotel operator for an analyst position there. I had several rounds of interviews, and I got eventually accepted. And yes, and basically that was a starting point. Back then I was thinking, hey, I'm gonna stay here for like half a year, like 1 year to survive because I needed money. But eventually it ended up, make me being kind of me trying to first of all exploring the hotel industry because that's what I'm focusing right now, right? But in the future, I want to actually expand. I'm not planning on to leave or anything. I'm trying to get like as much experience like as possible right now. But I would also like to to get more involvement or exposure to like also like office real estate and or like retail. Yeah, so probably what I'm doing on the everyday basis. Well, that's gross. It's actually global hotel operator, which is growing quite actively. Not the kind of, how do I say it? It's not like Hilton or like Marriott where like you get like like a place to sleep, but like very luxury. It's more like unique, right? Because we're offering accommodation in kind of off the beaten locations, like like unique accommodation, alternative accommodation. In places like all over the world, like Panama. Like for example, like we have a project in Panama in Red Frog, which I like a lot because it's very unique and people get there really like immersive experience because it's on the remote island and you can get there only by boat. And when you come there, it's basically like you are in the middle of the jungle, right? And you have there like teepees and like like shared accommodation. You have like different like wellness, yoga classes. Also, a lot of focus is put on programming. So it's like a community in the middle of the jungle, and it's very cool. And I'm seeking out like properties like this, seeing how we can like refurbish them, renovate them, put them under our brand, and and kind of move it forward. So I'm taking everything from like either like reaching out directly to the landlords where their assets are underperforming, and then they're looking for someone who would take it over, or I'm talking to the brokers and then analyzing it, like all the KPIs, ADRs, occupancy, cap rates in the area, see if it would be feasible for our brand, and then lead it forward.
Yeah, I think first off, it's incredible how small our industry is. That we're speaking with Dima in Kyiv, Ukraine. Dima's working on a project in Panama called Red Frog. That both Sam and I know. In fact, we know the original developers of the site. I think they ended up selling it to a different group while developing in Panama, and how the world kind of goes full circle, at least in our small industry. And I say small, it's big. Now, in terms of the scope, let's stay on the scope of what you're working on now, and then I'd love we can dig back into what it's like working in a war-torn country in real estate. You mentioned an asset in Panama. Do you have any hotel assets in Ukraine, or is everything you're working on outside of Ukraine or even outside of Eastern Europe?
Unfortunately, not in Ukraine. Also, I'm always saying like that Ukraine is very underdeveloped in that regard, because just like it's this off the beaten destination that people don't really know about. And I've had friends from like Europe and then US visiting Ukraine like a lot of times, and then they're saying, okay, that's such an amazing destination, like so many like nice people, and like you have everything here. You have you have jungles, you have pink lakes, you have mountains. So there is a lot to do, and I wish at some point in the future I could bring here some brand.
So the company you're working with now, are they headquartered in Ukraine? I may admit, where are they headquartered? And if they're not in Ukraine, how did you go about procuring your job? I'm just curious to hear more about that.
No, it's not in Ukraine. It's like not related to Ukraine in any way. I'm working remotely actually. We're headquartered we have 4 headquarters actually. One in New York, and then the other one is in the UK, London, Spain, and then Tel Aviv, Israel. And we have properties all over the world. It's literally in every continent, from like Latam to US, Europe, and then also like Australia and Africa. So literally in every continent.
So how did you position yourself? So I'm sure it was an active, I'm sure you responded to some job opening. You have no experience in real estate or in the hotel industry in particular. How did you position yourself, or what advice could you offer to others that are in your same position, even, from around the world, I guess? How did you position yourself to get into this job in such a different industry?
Yeah, look, I think it's very similar to what I was doing before, right? I mean, in the private equity fund, we were looking at the P&L statement, and we were thinking, okay, so how can we, drive revenue? So how we can cut operational expenses? And I think it's very similar to the hotel. Okay, you have you have the ADRs, you have basically how you drive revenues, you have F&B. You think, okay, how you can turn it around, and then, okay, of course, like the operational expenses. So back then, I was basically giving the task of, okay, look at this P&L and see what's wrong with this. Like look at the GOPs, how well it is performing, where you think you would cut, or like what would you suggest? And back then, my idea was, okay, so we have a hotel somewhere, let's say like in Black Forest in Germany, right? And the operational expenses, let's say ING, were like super high. So I was saying, okay, so Black Forest is such a huge destination. We have a small key count in this destination, like for 40 keys. Why not create it a real destination? Like Black Forest, put 3-4 hotels there, have 1 GM, cut an operational expense, and at the same time, increase the GOPs. So it was back then. I was not I was applying for a junior position, right? So I guess the requirements were not that high. Basically, they needed support, but eventually, with time, I got exposure, and I started with EMEA, focusing on EMEA, and then now I'm working on basically projects all over the world. But that was my interview.
Yeah, and that's great. We often give that advice actually for people who are transitioning, is that you may take a step backwards in job title, but from that experience, and you outlined it perfectly, you will rapidly excel just because of where you were in it's different but somewhat similar industry as you outlined so well. Like that temporary step back actually could be a great springboard into a new industry, and you'll excel a lot faster. Great. No, that's very good.
Dima, how has it been working remote from a country that's currently at war? You mentioned before we started that you've had periods where you have bombing raids happening and your power's out and you're having to go to, you said, the corner store where there is some internet. Help the audience get a sense for what life is like for you working in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, basically those were crazy times. Sometime in August last year, I would say, around August, September last year, basically Russia started firing a lot of missiles all over Ukraine, the capital, and then other regions. And basically their idea was to kind of try to cut our basically utilities like electricity, gas, water. Well, and they managed. So for example, there were days where we were sitting, for 3, 4, 5 days without electricity, or without water, or without both, And at these times, well, you don't have electricity, you don't have Wi-Fi, right? So back then I had to, like either like change places, like 5 times a day, like in the morning I'm going to the cafe where there is an electric generator, and they have Wi-Fi here, so I'm going there. I work there for like 4 hours. Then, for example, I'm going to like my mom's home because we also used to have this kind of I'm not sure how to explain it, but basically the city as a whole, like there are a couple of districts, right? And then each district is being turned off from electricity at a time. So I had to run from one place to another place, and so I was working at my mom's, and at my mom's they got cut off electricity. I was going to the gas station because at the gas station once again they have the electric generator. I was working from there, and that was continuing for like 4 months or so. So it was crazy, and like at some point I was like, God, I can't do this anymore. But I think for some like at some point, like this job actually helped me kind of go through this because I mean, like I think the good thing about the real estate that you kind of and at my position you really get to kind of explore a lot of opportunities all over the world, and you really like I really get into like each of them, and back at that time it helped me distract from what's happening in my country, that somewhere else it can create something really cool.
So today, you said that was last September. Is that when you said you were saying this was happening?
Yeah. It was like, no, it happened like for a couple of months, like September,
Yeah.
October, like every like 1 or 2 weeks they were like firing missiles, and then like they targeted some like electric station, and then we didn't have electricity, but then basically the technicians they managed to repair it, and then the thing over and over again, like this, and this was continuing for 4 months. I would say like for the last months or like months and a half, this air attacks they stopped because apparently Russia is running out of missiles or something, because they were firing a lot of them. So now we have the kind of normal supply of electricity and water, and it's much better. Like it feels like a blessing, to be honest, these days.
So you're in Kiev? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Kiev. Yep.
And so, like, what's the day to day? Are people walking around, moving, and just acting normal? And I put in air quotes if you're listening, right? Whatever normal is right now. Are they moving around and conducting business one with another and things like that? Or are people? Is there what's kind of what's happening today?
In Kiev, like everything is open. You can go to the cinema. You can buy food. Like everything, you have everything here basically, right? Like,
Okay.
It's I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but like if you don't read the news, you don't feel that there is war in Ukraine, because in Kiev everything is going normal right now. We don't have air attacks. People are are going out. It's just like like for the past like half a year, like one year or so, like 400 days actually, that the war started. Basically, you wake up and you start reading news and you see that something happened, and of course, this affects your mood. But otherwise, the business is going on. Actually, like even the investment industry started to pick up. There are some investments in tech right now in Ukraine. So we survive. We do good right now.
So I want to ask you, to the extent that you're aware in Kiev, I've never thought about this or learned about it or anything. How has the war impacted the real estate industry and business, whether it's rents for office or residential, or just people purchasing houses and things like that? Has there been, and I know you said things have kind of stabilized and the movies are open and all that. What has the impact been from like the start of the war to now, if you've been paying attention? I know you're doing international real estate and hotel. I'm curious to what you know and if you could share anything on the ground.
Well, so actually, I think real estate in Ukraine was one of the industries that was impacted the most. Because if you're talking about the big cities like Odessa, Kiev, like Kramatorsk, Lviv, like all the development stopped. All the development kind of developers, they put their assets on hold. So nothing is being built here. And then on the other hand, like if you're talking about the Western Ukraine, because basically when the war started, a lot of people actually moved to Western Ukraine because they considered it as a safe haven. Let's put it this way. So there the development picked up, especially, how do I say it? Like more like short-term rentals and then like kind of, cottage houses, stuff like this. But if we're talking about big cities, well, it's nothing is happening here right now. I have actually friends who invested into real estate, last year, and well, they still kind of losing money because it did not pick up, and no one knows when it's going to pick up again. And then on the other hand, so in terms of like rents, I'm going to tell for residential, because well, hospitality is not that developed in Ukraine, and I can't provide much insight there. But like during the war, because during these months when we had electricity cuts, and then no utilities, basically the rents in Kiev, which is normally like one of the most expensive cities in Ukraine, they went down. Whereas like Western Ukraine, like Lviv, Chernivtsi, it picked up. Because well, people who are renting places, there is no kind of point for them to rent in Kiev when they can go somewhere else where there is more stable supply.
Even with war, it's supply demand fundamental. Everybody should move to the west, and therefore there's more demand. No, that's fascinating.
But also one interesting thing about, like, to me, I just got to know this recently, that in Ukraine we have no single international developer involved. So it's all like local Ukrainian developers because of the country risk. Because international developers don't want to enter the country because, well, we had war from 2014, right? It's not like war started, like in 2022 because there was Donbass.
What strikes me from the conversation, Dima, and thank you for coming on, and for the audience. So Dima has also agreed to contribute some of his knowledge to our international real estate series. So you'll see his name pop up on our blog a time or two, which is very kind of him. But what strikes me about this conversation is that adversity, challenges are all relative. And for many of us in the industry, our biggest adversity is our capital partner drops out, or our tenant, vacates. But it could be a lot worse. And so to you, Dima, as you were living a relatively normal life, or a very normal life, right? You'd gone to a great university, you come back, you're working in an interesting firm, you're just starting your career, you're excited, and all of a sudden war hits, and now your life seemingly gets turned upside down. What was the mindset, the mentality that you had that helped you to move beyond that and say, look, I need to continue to grow in my career and to seek out opportunities like the firm that you're working at? What's the mindset? What advice could you offer someone else that's going through challenging times, whether their tenant left or a family member passed or their business went out of business or their country goes to war? What's some advice that you could give people that will help them have the resolve to continue to grow and to seek out opportunities?
Look, I think it's also very kind of particular to my situation, because when the war started, like there was this, like feeling of connectedness between like all of Ukrainians, like everyone contributed in their own way. Someone, like was, at the forefront fighting Russians. Someone was paying taxes. Someone was, donating to different, like funds, to buy drones to bring them to the battlefield. And I think this was because, everyone was doing something to help our country, to help Ukraine. This was also kind of moving me kind of forward. Okay, so I need to, like it was kind of, the thing is, Ukrainians are very creative in the way, like when they need to. And also like the war, like right now in Ukraine, there are several campaigns, when they are collecting money on different initiatives, starting from like, like just supporting like, like ordinary people, like, like humanitarian help, and finishing with, like buying drones or like, equipment for military, right? And it's being advertised very actively and in very interesting ways. So it's kind of, a quest for you, how much you can donate, to each of these funds. So this was kind of one. So I wanted to be able to help my country, if not, at the forefront, the battlefield, but, like with something that I can supply someone with, either like medicine or, or West or something else. And then second thing is, well, look, it's just, I was always career oriented. I always wanted to grow in my career. But the thing is, back then when I was working in a private equity fund, I didn't feel like it was my place. And I'm not sure it's whether because, well, back then you were like an intern, right? And you don't get as much exposure to all the things to kind of actually learn stuff, and do stuff and be able to see the way how you can contribute to this organization. But here, like when I kind of switched to real estate, so first, I think the industry just caught me. That's one. But also the second thing is because here I have kind of the opportunity to actually, like go find some projects, and if like which I think interesting, and like show them to the senior management, like see what they say on that. So I have kind of a say, and I know I see the way for myself to develop here. I see the way for myself how I can contribute, and I just like what I'm doing. So I think that's this two components basically.
Wow. And I know that it's an incredible story filled with struggle, filled with, rising to the occasion and all these things. It's fantastic. Your initial reason for reaching out to Adventures in CRE was to, and correct me if I'm wrong, was to because of your new position and your entry into commercial real estate, was to take your skills and start developing them further. And so you're starting you've started it. You're beginning the accelerator. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I'm just beginning, to be honest, because I'm also like, at the same time I'm preparing for CFA, Chartered Financial Exam.
Okay.
So it's a bit tough, and then I also have work, and then I also have family. So I'm kind of juggling, around.
Yeah.
So I'm very at the beginning, but yes. So the thing is, actually, before going into this interview with the place where I work right now, I did the course from Wall Street Prep, and I'm pretty sure that you probably know this, right? It was good, but I felt like it was a bit. It is a good course, and it helped me a lot probably to get this job and actually get the understanding of the real estate. It was like very, very, like high level. Probably that's the word. And then the colleague recommended me, hey, like look into the Adventures in CRE, and I looked at your curriculum, which was very experience based. And then you also, like, I never saw a course which offered deep dive into hotel P&L and like what hotel investments kind of how they function. So that's what also caught my kind of interest. And it's very expansive. You cover a lot of topics. You give a really good insight into every area. Because as I told at the beginning, like I'm working in hotels right now, right? And that's where I'm going to stay. But probably I also want to explore, sometimes I want to explore, I want to go, beyond, because, well, unless I try something else, how can I know that I like hotels, that I want to work in the hospitality, in the future? So, and that's a way for me to also kind of see, okay, so what's happening, out there. And that's why it's so much interesting for me.
They say never stop learning, right? It's
never stop learning.
Never stop learning. If there's anyone who has an excuse to take a pause on learning, it's Dima, and yet it's incredible. What you're and the CFA together with the accelerator at the same time, that is a heavy lift. It's really impressive. I'm confident that 30 years from now, we're all going to hopefully sit around a table somewhere, Dima, and you're going to be a titan of real estate in your part of the world, and we'll be grateful to have met you. So thank you for your time, Sam. I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, this has been really awesome, Dima. Thank you so much. For everybody listening, our struggles and the challenges that we have, they're all relative. And this has been, for me, an enlightening conversation. Very good. Thanks for listening, and we will see you on the next episode, guys.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Adventures in CRE Audio Series. For show notes and additional resources, head over to www.adventuresincre.com/audio series.